I hope it is recording. Yes.
Yes, sir.
So, particle size, surface area, and porosity, these three govern the reactivity of any substances. Larger the surface area, larger the reaction center. Larger the porosity, maybe better the interaction when you are going to use them as a dye-sensitized solar cell material. There will be a greater absorption of dye molecules if it is having a more pores or porous. And of course, the rate of combustion also can be larger. Particle size or grain size, surface area, and porosity, they directly influence on the performance of the materials towards reactivity. For example, catalytic applications. It may be a fuel cell applications or photocatalytic applications or any other applications. So 20 years, 30 years, or even much before that, we were not aware of these nanomaterials. We have been using only bulk foils, bulk materials. We have not tailored the grain sizes into nano and employed them for any reaction. Those days, the scientists or the engineers were happy with the whatever the rate the reaction has given or the catalyst was given as given. But now you can engineer the grain sizes, you can engineer the band gap, you can tailor the particle sizes in such a way that you'll be able to enhance the velocity of the reaction. What is the use of increasing the velocity of the reaction? What are the merits or advantages? Or if at all any demerits I'm going to have it. Can you think of something? Why one has to increase the velocity of the reaction or rate of the reaction? What if it happens one week time instead of one day a reaction completing? What is the benefit you are going to get?
Time saving, money saving, sir.
Definitely a lot of benefits. Time saving, energy saving, manpower, productivity increases. There are many positive aspects. That's why the communities working on the kinetics, the rate of the reaction, always to increase the reaction. I told you, I don't know whether I shared this information or not. Maybe I would have shared in one of the classes, maybe in the beginning. At least 1% of the energy is globally consumed in order to generate the urea. You believe it or not? Globally, 1% of the energy is consumed or utilized for the generation of urea. Okay. The basis for this reaction or this product is conversion of nitrogen into ammonia by reaction with the CO, carbon monoxide. When you make nitrogen and carbon monoxide to undergo reaction, it will form ammonia. Then ammonia is converted into urea, that is different. But conversion of nitrogen into ammonia using Le-Chatelier's principles requires promoters, catalysts, etc. I would have shared vanadium oxide acting as a promoter, iron pentoxide, iron oxide, not pentoxide, vanadium pentoxide, iron oxide, Fe2O3. They are all catalysts and promoters. You can decrease the rate of, you can decrease the time for the generation of ammonia. Then production of urea can be increased. Time can be reduced. Energy can be saved. So always this kinetic community is working towards improving the kinetics of the reaction. So implement a different catalyst, efficient catalyst. So nowadays these nanomaterials facilitates for that. So we have also seen what are particle sizes and grain sizes as well as crystallite sizes. I'm sure by now you should be familiar with these terminologies. Grain sizes, particle size, more or less same. It shows the external view. It might contain many crystallites, whereas crystallite size within which the back planes are unique, one direction, maybe 111 plane or 222 plane, etc. Like a domain, magnetic domain sizes, within which all the spins are orienting in one direction or dimensions. So particle size, we can have different types of particles: spherical particle, hexagonal, pentagonal, square, non-spherical, shapeless particles, etc. Whether it is a spherical particle, non-spherical particle, hexagon, pentagon, square, triangular, cylindrical, etc., whatnot, will have at least one characteristic so that you can know what shape it is. So, for example, spherical particle, since it is so spherical, symmetric, you require at least one parameter is enough to define a spherical shape. On the other hand, maybe if it is a cylindrical, you require two parameters, length and width, or radius and height. But whereas for a spherical particle, you require only one parameter, either radius or diameter. For all other particles, maybe more than one parameter might be requiring in order to define the characteristic of any shape. Okay. So you can see that this is the morphology or canopy of some drug, ibuprofen. I think it is antipyretic drug, or if someone can correct me if you are connected to this. So this is how the canopy looks on the surface of ibuprofen. Okay, sometimes shapeless, platelets, spherical, non-spherical, etc. So whether it is a spherical or cylindrical or rod, wire, triangular, rectangular, cuboid, cube, or hexagon, pentagon, etc., we need to have at least one parameter to characterize. So spherical, one parameter, diameter or radius, and cylindrical, maybe you require two parameters. How to know this particle size and the shape? Sir, we have elaborately seen so many, at least 3-4 microscope. Why we require additional equipment or techniques to know the particle shape and size? So some of you may be thinking on this. We have completed SEM, TEM, STM, AFM, which gives which gave much better information about the shape, size, distribution of the material. Not only that, even chemical nature, crystallographic nature also we could get, but still why you want to study about the particle size? Yes, there are several methods to study the particle sizes, grain sizes. Okay, so each gives own merits or informations. So to know the particle size, grain sizes, there are different techniques. Last 2-3 classes we have completed SEM, TEM, AFM, AFM, STM. But there are many other methods to know the particle sizes. Direct observation, that is what we have seen in SEM, as TEM, or AFM, etc. Directly you can map it. Directly you map it. Or sieving. Sieving. What is sieving? You take your fine gauze, take your material, go on sieving it. Smaller particle will fall down, larger particle will stay on the sieves, gauze. So depending on the width and the wide size, you'll be able to separate the grains. This is sieving, typical sieving. Okay. Then you can use a sedimentation technique. You take some solvents, preferably water. The sample should not dissolve in it. Then disperse it. Then allow to settle it. Depending on the size and the shape, depending on the size, not necessarily shape. Depending on the size, so some particles may float, some particle may settle. Depending on the size, so the settling rate will be different. By this, you'll be able to separate or see different particle sizes. Or there is an electrochemical methods of sensing the particle sizes. Electro-zone sensing. Then, to some extent, you can also know using BET, Brenner Emmer Teller. BET. You'll be able to know the surface area. We started with the surface area in the beginning, 3 months back. or beginning of this course, maybe November or beginning of December. The very surface area one can get from DET. Or you can also use DLS technique to know the particle sizes or grain sizes. Nothing but dynamic light scattering, or is also known as photocorrelation spectroscopy. Photocorrelation spectroscopy. So there is nothing excitation taking place here in this technique, but we use some light, photons, to derive the information about the grain sizes. So there are different methods to know the particle sizes or grain sizes. And these are the direct observation. Maybe you can use SEM, or in sieving, combination of particle and shape, you can get it. Sedimentation. Okay, so that's what is being done in the DLS. That's the focus of today's class. We will be using Stokes' law based on the scattering ability of the particles. You'll be able to separate or to know the different sizes and shapes, at least sizes. And the BET surface area analyzer will be able to know what is the specific surface area of the material the material is having, non-structure. It's highly connected. So this is the direct observation by microscope. Depending on the resolution, we'll be able to use a light microscope or optical microscope. So there is a limitation definitely. So you will have to go for electron microscope, whether SEM, TEM, STM, AFM, that depends on your applications or requirement. So in the direct observation using micrographs, you will be able to see the particle size, shape, distribution. And if you use STEM or EDX, you'll be able to know crystallographic nature. But in the dynamic light scattering, you'll be able to know the particle sizes by applying the principle of Brownian motion or taking the advantage of Brownian motion. What is Brownian motion? I think this word is not new to you. Already I introduced the Tyndall effect, or you would have learned it in the lower classes. Tyndall effect. It is possible to see the path of the light when the light is allowed to pass through on a transparent colloidal solution. That is Tyndall effect. What is Brownian movement or Brownian motion or movement? You will be able to see the mobility of the ions or particles when the grains are dispersed in a solution, transparent solution. Take some powder sample, disperse in solvent, transparent solvent, and these particles are always kicked by the solvent molecules. And these particles are always under mobility. Brown invented this and named after him. So you'll be able to see the mobility of the grains kicked by the solvent molecules when the dispersion is made. And you can track that mobility, using which it is possible to know what is the size of the grain or particle. With the help of this Stokes-Einstein equation, or simply known as Stokes equation. D, hydrodynamic diameter is equal to kT by 3 pi eta d. Okay, so D is hydrodynamic diameter, roughly gives about the particle sizes. He is related to very much on the diffusion coefficient. All other things are kept constant. Temperature is kept constant. Boltzmann constant is constant. Viscosity, if it is a water, it is kept constant, or if other than water, also kept constant, maybe different number. But so the hydrodiameter inversely proportional to the translational coefficient, diffusion coefficient, or diffusion coefficient. So it means that depending on the size, the diffusion coefficient is nothing but mobility. It gives about the mobility of the particle. So I'm sure you will agree with me. Not all the sizes will have the same mobility. It's like a person. Maybe you are asked to walk or run. A group of people, you ask them to run or walk. It's not that all the people will run or walk at the same speed. Depending on their mass or ability, they'll be able to walk faster, fast or slow, or run quick or slow. Similarly, the particles also, depending on the sizes, so they can be kicked by the water molecules and they can travel at a different speed, different speed or different rate. And you will be able to track that speed with the help of your laser radiations. With the help of your laser radiations. So, for example, you take a solid powder in a solid in the form of a powder, disperse it in a solvent. What will happen? Definitely, it will be hydrated. Ions will be hydrated definitely. We have a ionic radius, hydration radius. Similarly, you have a particle and its radius. Definitely, the surface is not neutral. So definitely having some charges, it will pick up some water molecule or solvent molecule, and there will be a solvation radius. And if it is a water as the solvent, you call this as a hydrodynamic radius, hydrodynamic diameter or radius. Okay, so now particles are there and it can travel, and it can travel all along the vessel within the liquid, all along the vessel. Now you shine the laser radiation, coherent radiations, and it falls on, it will fall on the surface of these hydrodynamic particles. What will happen? What you can expect? We can expect a scattering. We can expect a scattering. So we can have here two types of scattering: constructive scattering and destructive scattering. And we know that, as the name implies, destructive scattering will not give you much better intensity after scattering. Whereas, so constructive interference will give you large intensity. You track the intensity of that scattered laser radiation, you'll be able to know the particle sizes. You'll be able to know the particle sizes. So basically, you take a solid powder, disperse in a solvent molecule kicks off the solid particles and makes a mobility. That mobility is known as Brownian movement or Brownian motion. Now you shine the laser radiation and you track the particles. So these particles, hydrated particle will scatter the laser radiation, either by destructive scattering or constructive interference or scattering. So one of them is going to give the intensity. You monitor that intensity and manipulate into particle sizes. So let's assume you have two types of particles. One is having a 5 nanometer particle, collection of 5 nanometer particles, and a collection of 50 nanometer particles. Which will move larger, longer, or quicker? Which particle will move fast or slow? So Brownian motion for which particle will be less or lower? Smaller size or larger size? Obvious, right? Larger will be slower, bulky, cannot move. Less particle size or smaller particle size. Okay, so it can easily be kicked by the water molecule. You can see that at each moment, this small particle will make a displacement, will move. Whereas large particle will take some time. It has to get ready. Okay, so large particle has to get ready slowly. Okay, so the Brownian movement or the momentary transition from one place to another place in a given time is less in the case of large particle compared to the smaller particle. You see that it makes zigzag motion quickly, and here it is slow. because large particles. Okay, so similarly, the intensity that is coming out from these particles also will be different. That is the basis used in DLS measurement. You note the intensity at time t, then at time delta t or 3 delta t, 4 delta t at different time intervals. You would have seen that the particles already moved into different spaces, different places. That is what the Brownian motion or Brownian mobility means. So the point is that you have your two types of particles. One is having a smaller particle, another is having a larger particles. Let's say it is in the equal populations. 1000 particles of 5 nanometer, 1000 particles of 50 nanometer. So if I plot the intensity of the scattered laser radiation coming from this particle in terms of population, I will be able to see equal population. Or if I plot in terms of volume, I will be able to distinguish those two particles. Or in terms of intensity that you can get from smaller particle and larger particle, if I able to plot it, I'll be able to distinguish very much. Even little difference in the particle sizes, it can be possible to detect using DLS technique. Because the scattering coming from the smaller particles will be less, scattering light or the intensity of the scattered light coming from the larger particle will be significant larger, and you will be able to distinguish any sizes. This is another way of knowing the particle sizes. And your Stokes-Einstein law gives the information of hydrodynamic radius is nothing but if you remove the hydrated cell and it is only solid particle, the real particle size you will be able to get it. Real particle size you will be able to get it. I think I'm mostly done with the DLS technique. So you would have realized that it's not one technique will be useful to study or characterize the nanostructured materials. A combination of tools are required. Maybe X-ray diffraction to spectroscopic to microscopic to DLS, and the last technique is BET surface area analyzer. So the fascinating aspect of nanomaterial is increased surface area when we move from bulk to nano. How do we get this increased surface area practically? So in the first unit, we have already worked out theoretically in a given two different sizes, it is possible to estimate the particles surface area and the surface to volume ratio. How will you get practically? Why it is important? Why it is important? In the beginning of today's class, I told you, larger the specific surface area or surface area, better the reaction center, or better the reaction center, the rate of the rate or velocity of the reaction will be quicker. Here, two particles are given, two grains are given. What is the difference you are seeing? Seems to be similar shape, similar size. Excuse me. What is the difference you are seeing?
Porous.
So one is having more porous, another one is having less porous, or large porous, smaller porous. Same size, same shape. Maybe you can assume that materials are also same, but you can create this kind of morphology or this kind of feature. One is having large pores, another one is having smaller pores. So it is measured in porosity or surface area. Both are interlinked. Surface area and porosity, grain sizes are interlinked. Looks large pores, here looks a tiny pores. And if it is a titanium oxide, and if it is utilized for hydrogen generation by splitting the water, maybe electrochemically or photochemically, so the one having large surface area will be able to give hydrogen production or decomposition of water larger. You know, this photocatalytic hydrogen generation using photocatalysis was invented in 1960 by Honda. Since then, the interest on the photocatalysis has evolved. Now it has taken different dimensions, not only to generate hydrogen as a fuel, to decompose the toxic dyes, or many other applications are there. Or if this material is a titanium oxide and if you are going to use for DSSC applications, definitely the performance of this grain will be different. Performance of this grain will be different. How will you quantify the surface area and the porosity? Your BET measurement will be able to give that information or those informations. Here is another two cartoon. One cartoon looks there are no porous or porous materials. There is no porosity, but here looks large porosity or pores. This is a part of grain. In a material, in a powder sample, there is like this, there will be many grains or pores like this. No pores at all, non-porous solids. The solids having no porosity or porous spaces, voids, are called as non-porous solids. Okay, the solids having some pores, obviously they are called porous solids. Very simple to name them. What are the consequences? So non-porous solids will have low surface area. Very bad. No surface area at all. No surface area, it may not act as a good catalyst. It may not act as a catalyst itself. It's like a inert gold in the bulk. But once you make a nanomaterial, surface area can be increased. And if it is a porous, you will have a high specific pore volume. Non-porous solids will have a no pore volume or low surface area. Okay, so directly will influence on the performances. So the porosity, the porous nature of any material can be characterized or can be measured using this terminology known as porosity. So surface area, pore size, and specific pore volume, and using this you'll be able to define porosity is equal to volume of the pores and the volume of the solid. Usually it is in percentage. 90% porosity means it's highly porous. 10% porosity means highly dense surface. That's what it means. 90% porosity means it might have larger surface area. 10% porosity means it may be a thin film, flat, thin film, smooth surfaces, no surface area. Okay. So we can have a different types of pores, interconnected pores or open pores or closed pores or dead end pores or open pores. We can have such type of pores in any solid or powder materials, closed dead end pores or interconnected pores, etc. I have classification of these porous materials. 3 types of porous materials. Macroporous materials whose sizes are beyond 50 nanometer and above. If the pore sizes is in between 2 nanometer to 50 nanometer, they are called mesoporous materials. MCM family. Mobile Corporation, Silica Mobile Corporation, MCM. Santa Barbara, Amorphous, SBA families, they all come under mesoporous material whose pore sizes range from 2 to 50 nanometer. If the pore sizes are less than 2 nanometer, they are called micropores. Zeolites, carbon-based microporous material, metal organic frameworks, etc. Okay, three distinction you can have as per the standards of IUPAC. International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. So anyway, so depending on the size, you can group them under either macro, micro, or meso. And depending on the shapes, we can have different types of pores. Cylindrical pores, conical pore, or bottle, ink bottle, or spherical, or interstices, or sills. different types of shapes of pores. Not only size, shapes of pores also we can have it. And each have their own characteristic in terms of performances. Whether it is used for fuel cell application or dye absorption application or photo degradation applications. Anything. How to measure surface area and porosity or surface to volume ratio. There are several techniques. You can use wax, wide angle X-ray scattering or neutron scattering, or small angle neutron scattering. Wax, simply known as wax, or SAX, SAX, small angle scattering. You'll be able to know the porosity. Or SEM observation. SEM observation they do not give, or SEM observation doesn't give the 3D images. You'll be able to know the pores, but you will not be able to know the sizes, shapes. 3D shapes you will not be able to. Same way TEM also. And this tap density or mercury porosity meter, porosimetry, to some extent you can get the porosity of the material or surface area of the material. But very importantly, this gas adsorption will be able to give porosity, pore volume distribution, specific surface area, etc. So, but depending on the availability, people still continue to use these techniques to know the surface area or porosity, pore volume, etc. Small angle neutron scattering or wide angle X-ray scattering. So, if the pore sizes are in between 0.4 nanometer and 50 nanometer, that covers almost all 3 types of pores. You can use it. Mercury porosity. So it is possible to know the pore sizes even if it is a 1.5 nanometer. TEM, 3D is not possible, at least a 2D image from SEM and TEM it is possible to know. In 5 nanometer pores, it is good to use getting the grain sizes, not necessarily pore sizes. So then wax also can give you the information about the pore size and the porosity distribution. But this is what the gas adsorption is, the one that I want to inform you today. I think this is the last lecture in this in this unit. So gas absorption, using gas adsorption phenomena or the event, it is possible to know the surface area. Assume that you have been given titanium oxide or silicon oxide or any other oxide, and you are asked to estimate its particular surface area, and in the form of a powder form. And we know that the powder has a characteristic of grains, pores, and porosity. Correct? So you can have these solid powder get absorbed by some molecules, inert gaseous molecule, preferably nitrogen. How much amount of nitrogen is being absorbed on the solid powder, you'll be able to know the surface area, porosity, and pore size distribution. This is the basis. So when I say gas adsorption, it can be having 2 types of absorption, either physical absorption or chemical absorption, simply known as physisorption and chemisorption. The major difference is there is a strong chemical short range bonding between the adsorbent and adsorbate, and there are no such strong bonding present between the adsorbate and the adsorbent, sample and the nitrogen. In the case of physisorption, it is a weak here and it is a strong here. Okay, so it can be a monolayer adsorption or multi-layer adsorption depending on the type of the adsorption. I think you can go through these differences. 2 types of adsorption. These some molecules can get adsorbed on the surfaces. And by the way, adsorption is a surface phenomena. It doesn't penetrate into the depth of the material unless you have a pores like this. Gaseous molecule gets and get into the deep of the material. And how much amount of this adsorption will be able to give you the surface area, pore size, and pore volume. It can be a single layer or multi-layer adsorption. You will be able to know the volume of gas adsorbed based on the porosity associated with some solids. Larger the volume of the gas that is being adsorbed, more the porous. Definitely. A smooth surface will not absorb any gas. This is a smooth surface. Okay. This is a smooth surface. It will not absorb any molecules. Whereas this is a very soft, smooth surfaces having more pores. Will be able to absorb more gases. Larger the adsorption of the gas volume, more the porous, and you'll be able to indirectly know the particle, the surface area. Excuse me. So there is a theory, adsorption theory, to predict what kind of adsorption it can take place, whether it is a Freundlich absorption or Langmuir adsorption, or whether it is a physisorption or chemisorption. And there are at least 5-6 types of adsorption it is possible. I must be having. Yes. So type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, type 5 adsorption. I think I should show this one. Yes. Depending on the pores associated with the sample, you can have different types of adsorption. So they are called the adsorption isotherms. So gas is being adsorbed, and on return, gas is dissolved. How much volume of gas is adsorbed? Based on that, you will be able to know excuse me, the surface area and the porosity. If it is a cylindrical pore, you will have type 1 adsorption or adsorption isotherm. Or if it is a bottleneck, spherical, you can have type E or type 5 also, it is modes. So physisorption, chemisorptions are the two types of adsorption possible when any non-reacting gas is allowed to adsorb on any sample powder or powder samples. And there are two theories, as I told, Langmuir theory and Freundlich adsorption. And this Langmuir theory talks about the monolayer adsorption. Only single layer, it's assumed that only single layer is adsorbed on the solid sample, and how much amount of gas is adsorbed and its volume at what pressure, you'll be able to know. But in the case of this BET or the modified Langmuir isotherm, it talks about even multi-layer adsorption. Okay, so it means that you will be able to get much better information that you can get from Langmuir adsorption. I don't know how much you will appreciate all this content. Whoever is dealing with the solid sample, powder sample, definitely, and dealing with the rate of the reaction or rate of the dye adsorption, they will be doing this BET surface area analyzer. We have this equipment in the department. So this is the BET equation or adsorption equation, BET Brunner, Emmett, Teller. Okay, this equation, and you believe it or not, this is a linear equation. So with a slope, volume of gas that is being adsorbed. Okay, so from the slope, it is possible to estimate the surface area. Once you know the surface area, you make it into specific surface area by dividing the volume, mass of the material. So this BET surface area assumes multi-layer adsorption, and then there is no reaction taking place, and it is reversible process, and it is highly temperature dependent. Adsorption is a surface phenomena and temperature dependent. And using this, you'll be able to know the surface area. There is a dedicated equipment to do this surface area as well as porosity analyzer. If you know the surface area, or if you get this curve, from this curve, it is possible to know the surface area, porosity, and post-H distribution. All three information you'll be able to get it. I'm sure some of you will We'll make this experiment later in your mini project or major project. Okay, so how it is done? So the sample is weighed. At least 1 gram of material is required in the form of a powder. Of course, we can measure for the thin film also. Surface area will be very, very less. Porosity will be very, very less. Powder sample, take 1 gram, take it into the vessel or sample holder and cool to the liquid nitrogen temperature. Degas it. Remove all the pre-adsorbed moisture or gases. Okay, lower the temperature. Then allow inert gas, nitrogen for example, to get adsorbed on the pores of this powder and quantify how much amount of nitrogen is adsorbed. Then you can reverse it, deabsorb by heating the sample, bringing to room temperature. So that's why you get a hysteresis loop. That curve is known as adsorption isotherm. Depending on the type of the pores, they are type 1 isotherm curve or isotherm type 2 absorption, not absorption, type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, type 5 adsorption isotherms. Okay, so the type of the adsorption isotherm, you'll be able to know what shape of the pores this material can have it. In addition to knowing the surface area. I think I'm mostly done. So I'm mostly done with unit 4. So to summarize today's class, so we have seen porosity, surface area, and what else we have seen? 3 terminologies. Particle size. So I think I'm mostly done. So this BET is a little bit dry. I always have this problem in the last part of 4th unit. It's dry.
Check.
Yes, please. So, what is the range of particle sizes that exhibit Brownian movement? The particle should have the mobility. Okay, so it should have some mobility. Larger particle, very hard to move. The solvent molecule should be able to kick off the solid particles. If it does, then it can move. Generally, smaller particles, nanoparticles will have definitely range 1 to 100 nanometer, which will definitely have the Brownian movement. Maybe micron particle, very large particles will settle. Sedimentation will take place, will settle. Either will have to break down the particles or otherwise it will settle. So definitely nanoparticle 1 to 100 nanometer will have the Brownian mobility or Brownian movement. Yes. Yeah. Anything else you would like to add? Make some comments, clarifications.
So the porosity we are considering.
The characterization of the material. I'm left with the last unit, maybe 1 class or 2 more class. Yes, please.
Sure. We are considering the porosity different types, sir. Are we considering for each grain or for total solid particle?
No, it is a collection of a solid in a given solid. Solid may have different grain sizes, shapes. Pores also may be different pores and the types of pores and the volume of the pores. But it is for the given sample. So several grains make the material. I mean, materials make the grains, right? Okay, several grains, or in a solid we have several grains. The grain boundary, if it is having some voids, that void is the porosity we call them, and they can be having a different shapes and sizes also, and the density of pores also. Larger the pores, larger the porosity, or the density of the material is less. Correct, na? It's not for the individual grain, it is for the material. And if you analyze for 1 gram, you are analyzing for even 1 kg or 10 kg. It's same. If the method of preparation is same, it is same. Anything else, please? Any other questions, comments, clarification, even from other topics? You should have had offline classes. I usually don't go myself. I see that you drive me to go for more points. Now whatever comes on the slide, I am talking. Usually it is not like that in the offline classes. I will derive from your mouth. Let's see, at least in the next semester we will have like this, like that. Anything else? If not, shall we close?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.